Both Ellie and I grew up in pretty traditional families in a traditional enclave of Jewish Montreal called Côte Saint Luc, which ironically means the embankment of Saint Luc. When I grew up there, around the corner from Ellie, unbeknownst to us, it was 99% Jewish. I mean, one of the most densely Jewish areas in the world. We went to Jewish day school, we went to Jewish high school, we went on March of the Living, we had bar mitzvahs, we went on we finagled every free Israel trip that we could milk the community for. That first 18 years was very Jewy. Not religious, not Orthodox, but not Reform. A traditional, what we'd call conservative Canadian, so it's like conservative in Canada probably leans a bit more Orthodox compared to the States. There were seeds of the crisis, of the religious crisis happening to me from early on because, for example, I went on March of the Living, right, this trip to Poland and Israel when I was 15. And I came back and wore a kippah for the next 3 years. Because going to the camps when you're 15, and it was very heavy. It's still heavy, but it's when you're 15, it's I won't go too long into that story. But I ended up wearing a kippah for the next 3 years as a proud Jew that I needed the world to know that I'm Jewish and we survived But I was not at all religious. I was eating treif. I mean, whatever you could do to be goyish and then follow none of the laws, that was me, while wearing a kippah. So right there you could see I was already, struggling with this kind of thing. And then the next 18 years, the next high of my life, was spent in the world of media and entertainment. When I was 18, I got my first agent, or 17, I started doing movies and TV. And it had nothing to do for the most part with Judaism, although I kept on finding my Jewishness creeping into the parts. Like I played a part on a TV series called Student Bodies, a Canadian teen sitcom. It had nothing to do with religion at all, but when the Christmas episode came around, the creators of the show said, we realized that your character has to be Jewish. Why? Because I emanated. It was like coming out, it was already there. A big part of my upbringing also was comedy, was sitcoms. Seinfeld was a huge part of my life. Mel Brooks and Woody Allen was a huge part of growing up. Now, I don't think that I associated them with my formal Jewish education at the time. It's only in hindsight that I realized that the great rabbis that I studied under, I'm speaking of Rabbi Larry David, Rabbi Jerry Seinfeld, Rebbetzin Joan Rivers, Paul Reiser. I mean, the list goes on and on. Billy Crystal, whatever. There are many. Were extremely important to my understanding of Jewishness, Jewish culture, Jewish identity. It's a lens into how Jews see the world. Is our sense of humor and our legacy of comedy. So even though you said something about Jews take themselves seriously, I mean we do and we don't. Some do, of course, the ultra-Orthodox do, but we think that we are probably representative, we meaning Yid Life Crisis, of a whole swath of contemporary Jews who might not see it as a crisis. We call it the crisis, but it's about how are we going to live Jewishly. So all things considered, by the time I was an adult, I was fully atheist, hedonist, heathenist. I could go on, but my parents might see that, I don't know, whatever. I'll stop there. The point is, I was certainly not religious. In fact, I take a lot of issue with all religion, all organized religion, all religious dogma. And yet, I cannot separate myself from my Jewishness. I mean, it's just something that you realize by the time I hit double high, I was what I was. It's part of my DNA. It's, like I said, it's part of my outlook on the world. I think it comes from my Jewish education. You cannot separate me from that Jewish education. And sort of to the point of your question a second ago, one of the reasons why I think we could get away with being a little bit outrageous, depends what you call outrageous, but the opening scene of our very first episode was us eating poutine while the Kol Nidre is playing on the, and it's Yom Kippur, and I'm trying to get him to eat, and all that. For some people, that was sort of shocking, that and we're speaking Yiddish. But the point of the Yiddish was, sorry, I'll finish what I was saying, that we could get away with it because people see that it clearly must have come from a place of love and a place of education, because we couldn't poke this kind of fun or have this level of sort of nuance in the things that we're saying if we didn't really understand what it is that we're tearing down. So I was excited to tear it all down in such a way that people watching would also understand that, well, we must love it anyway, and because it was a lot of work to do it. More work than people realize also because of the Yiddish, which I don't want to burst anyone's bubble here, but I don't really speak it. We did learn Yiddish at Bialik High School in Montreal. We were lucky to do that. Yiddish in Montreal is a part of the fabric of the city. 100 years ago, it was the third most spoken language in the city after English and French. We learned it at Bialik a little bit for 5 years. Ellie had it before me when he was in elementary school and grew up with his grandparents in the home, and they spoke Yiddish. But for us, it was more about the idea, or for me, it was more about the idea of taking a language which was either considered dead or dying or only preserved really now by the ultra-Orthodox community, who I disagree with on almost everything, and who I'm not even sure they think I'm Jewish half the time. Or if they pass me on the street in Outremont or in the Mile End in Montreal and they're all streaming out of the, shtibeles, and I say, Good Shabbos, and most of them don't answer me. I don't even know, I was excited to go use their language, which in fact was not at all a religious language for the preceding 800 years before the Holocaust per se, right? It was a language of daily usage, of secular life, of business, and it just turned after the Holocaust and it became this thing that was only preserved by the ultra-Orthodox. So it was exciting for us to do something in Yiddish that was going to be profane and challenging to the status quo of Judaism. And it was also about showing the world to an extent that Jews are not all black hats. I mean, we're not a monolith. We're very varied peoples, and we wanted to sort of show off how weird Jews can be. We could be speaking the ultra-Orthodox language while eating bacon, as long as the bacon is extra crispy. That makes it kosher.